Hi everybody, and welcome to today's ISE webinar, which we're bringing in conjunction with ourselves, AGCAS, and also Paragon Law, who you're going to meet Kieran very shortly. If you haven't logged on to an ISE webinar before, my name is Steve Isherwood. I'm Chief Exec of the ISE, and I'll be acting as sort of host and compere for today's webinar. I hope you're not all sweltering too much, although Claire is joining us from Exeter. I think the thunderstorms have already hit, so if you are sweltering too much, there is relief on the way by the looks of it. So we'd like to make these sessions as interactive as possible, and I know I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. We had 467 people register, which is quite a lot of people. So feel free to pop questions in the chat. We've got time at the end to deal with that conversation. And please though, try and keep your questions short and quite punchy, because I've got to look at them all on my other monitor. So it helps with a bit of clarity in terms of sifting those through. But yes, we really want you to engage with the chat, engage with the Q&A, and we'd love to get your thoughts and your questions and get as many of those covered off as possible. We're also recording the webinar. You know, we'd like to get our knowledge and learning out as wide as possible. So you'll have the opportunity to go back and revisit things that you might have missed, or if you want to share it with colleagues, then please do that as well. We're very keen to spread the learning. All right, that's enough from me. Let's get started into the webinar. Let's do some introductions first. So just so you know who you'll be be presenting to you this lunchtime. Gemma, would you like to go first? Say hello and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm Gemma Green. I'm Head of External Relations at AGCAS. AGCAS is the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services, for those of you who don't know us.
Fantastic. Very good friends of the IC. We're always like to collaborate on things like this, don't we, Gemma? So
we do.
Thanks, Gemma. Claire, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I am here in my capacity as a member of the Internationalisation Task Group. It's an AGCAS task group, but in my day job, I am a careers consultant at the University of Exeter.
Cool, thanks, Claire. And I should say, actually, a lot of the work we've done on this has been in collaboration with lots of universities and lots of other organisations that are involved in this whole piece around international students and visas, etc. So some of this is a collaboration of that kind of work. So, and thanks to everybody who supported that, including yourselves, Claire. Thank you. And Kieran, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Of course. So I'm Kieran Abbas. I'm a solicitor at Paragon Law. I primarily specialise in work visas and student visas, and what I'm hoping to do today is to try and show you that sponsoring students or international students is really quite a nice, straightforward process. My work has exploded recently over the past 12 months, so I am conscious of how much of a labour shortage we have got in the UK, and I do think, you know, if international students can fill some of those gaps, that's useful for everyone, I think, all round.
Great, thanks, Kieran. We're definitely going to get into the detail with yourself. Great, so that expert lineup of panelists, lots of information to be gained from today. As I said at the start, pop your questions into the Q&A, use the chat function, and we'll come back to those towards the end of the webinar. Gemma, over to you. Do you want to kick us off properly?
I will indeed. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for the welcome. Delighted to be here from a sweltering attic in Sheffield. So as Stephen says, yeah, I'm here just to kind of kick things off before I then pass over to Claire, and then Claire will hand over to Kieran. And hopefully my slides have moved on. Is that right, Claire? Yes, marvellous. Okay, so the main purpose of today's webinar is, we hope, to help to demystify and enhance your knowledge of post-study work visas for international students. One of the main reasons that we are delivering this session now is because AGCAS has recently run a research project, and this has given us some much needed insights into understanding the facilitators and the barriers to success for international graduates who are seeking employment in the UK. So we're here because we want to share the preliminary findings with you, so those insights from our research project. And we also want to tell you some of the stories of international graduates, so to share their real life experiences of job hunting in the UK with a visa. We will mostly, I think, during the session that Claire and I are sort of covering, focus on the graduate route, so the graduate route visa, but we will be talking about the skilled worker route too, and I'm sure Kieran will be as part of her slot at various points as we go through. And as Stephen says, the plan is that we will leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So we're aiming to get through everything by, I think, around 1:15, maybe earlier, so that then between us we can answer any questions that you have. Okay, so just a little bit of background just to start with, I guess to help fit all the pieces of this jigsaw together. So why are we here and why are we all here together? For those of you who don't know AGCAS, and I mentioned in my intro, we're the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services. So we are a membership body, very much like ISE, and our members are careers and employability practitioners in university career services throughout the UK. So currently, at the time of speaking to you, we have a membership base of just over 4,500 individual members, most of whom are based in 167 higher education institutions. And then my role at AGCAS is as Head of External Relations. And one of my areas of responsibility is to support the work of our special interest task groups, one of which is the AGCAS Internationalisation Task Group. So I have the great pleasure of working with Claire and with other members of our internationalisation task group. So that's Helen at Newcastle, that's Jim at St Andrews, that's Teresa at Nottingham, that's Katie at Plymouth, and Nolene at Lancaster, all of whom are experts, careers professionals, and specialists in supporting international students. And then at the heart of the task group's work is the delivery of training and resources to promote good practice in international employability support across the whole of the AGCAS community. And then the other thing that we do is we then draw on the expertise within the task group and we join forces. So we join forces with other sector bodies and membership organisations to influence and to lobby government around policies that relate to international student experience or international graduate outcomes. And then we harness this expertise and we draw on this groundswell of support across the sector, ultimately to improve the international student experience. That is our core aim. Before we move on to talk about our research project in detail, I just thought I'd give you a very brief overview of the policy landscape, I guess in terms of those core developments over the past couple of years and a timeline of events really, specifically around immigration routes for international students. So in 2019, the UK government launched its international education strategy, and that stressed the importance of enhancing the international student experience before, during, and after study. That same strategy also set a target for the UK to recruit 600,000 international students by a deadline of 2030. And then also in 2019, the new post-study work route was announced. So this is the graduate route visa. And this enables international students to remain in the UK, to work or to look for work for a 2-year period or for 3 years for PhD candidates. And that is all without the need for employer sponsorship. So the graduate route launched officially on the 1st of July, 2021. And then in early 2022, we hear that the UK has already surpassed that 600,000 target. So the latest data shows that for the year 2020-21, there were just over 605,000 international students studying in the UK. And then that breaks down as 152,000 from the EU and 452,000 who were non-EU. We know, many of you will know, that not all international graduates will choose to stay in the UK. But there's no doubt that the new graduate route has proved to be really popular with international recruitment markets, and it is certainly one of the contributing factors to the UK hitting that target of 600,000 international students pretty much a decade early. So there's lots of good news, all of which is attracting international talent to the UK, and it is enabling employers to benefit from this tremendous, this vast talent pool of international graduates. But then for us, and I guess, you know, the flip side for the sector, and I think this is particularly the case for anybody who is working in higher education, so whether that's in a career service, whether that is in alumni relations, whether that's in student recruitment, whether that's in employer engagement, we are facing significant challenges because we are struggling to fully understand and learn and know about our international students' destinations. So where are our international students working? Who are they working for? And under what terms are they working? And the reason that we don't know is because we don't have good enough data and we don't have this robust evidence base. And this has come at a time when there's increasing pressure on universities to demonstrate that return on investment to international students. So there is greater emphasis that is being placed on international students' employability. And we know that graduate outcomes, employment, career advancement, all of those are cited as key drivers or primary motivations for international students to come and study in the UK. One of the reasons why we don't have good enough data is because HESA, so that is the Higher Education Statistics Agency, has stopped calling international graduates as part of the Graduate Outcomes Survey. So HESA does still collect data on the outcomes of international graduates via other means, so that's via the online survey route. But because historically, 50% of the data that was gathered from international graduates was done so via telephone calling, we have now got a huge gap in the body of evidence since that calling has stopped. And this is on top of the fact that already, general response rates to the survey have been consistently pretty low already, so not hitting those response rate targets for most of the survey's graduate population. So all that considered, and then in the interest of doing what we at AGCAS can try to do to enhance this dwindling body of evidence, AGCAS, through the Internationalisation Task Group, we designed a snapshot survey. So this was to help us to develop our knowledge of the outcomes of international students who choose to remain in the UK after graduation. So our survey was open to graduates who completed their studies after the 1st of July. So we wanted to map that against the launch of the graduate route. And we collected some data during March and April of this year. The aim of the project was primarily to identify the barriers or the facilitators to international graduate success in the UK. But we also did want to hear international graduates' perceptions of employers' knowledge of and engagement with post-study work visas to date. And then, more importantly, we wanted to capture the stories of international graduates as real individuals. So we know that the Home Office is only looking at the numbers. They're looking at the numbers of visas that have been granted to measure the success of post-study work routes. But what we wanted to do was to look beyond the numbers, to humanise the experiences of international graduates and allow them to tell their stories. So our work on this project, as Stephen has already said, has been a truly collaborative mission from the outset. We have worked really closely with member organisations of ISEG, so that's the International Student Employability Group, and that includes ISE and all of the other organisations that you can see on this slide. And we'd just like to thank also our ISEG allies for supporting our work in this area and for sharing the survey and also the findings across their respective networks. That's the background. I am now going to hand over to Claire, and Claire is going to talk more about our preliminary findings and what international graduates had to say about their experiences.
Thanks, Gemma. So I am going to share some quick bits of kind of quantitative data, and then I'm going to move on to the bits that I find really interesting, the qualitative, the experiences of our international grads. So I'm going to run through these things: the facilitators and barriers, what leads to success, how well international graduates felt that employers understood the routes, and I'm going to share some personal experiences as well. So next slide, please, Gemma. So who took part in the survey then? We had 1,010 responses, which we whittled down for our first kind of analysis to 345. And those were responders who were either using the graduate route or were employed with the skilled worker visa. You can see there that the majority of them, 85%, were using the graduate route. And we had a good spread of universities, 52 different universities, a good spread of nationalities, 71 in total. Most of our respondents were postgraduate students. Unsurprisingly, it tends to be postgrad courses that attract high numbers of international students in the UK. And again, fairly unsurprisingly, the majority of them were studying business and management, followed by engineering and computing. And next slide, please, Gemma. Gemma's my humble assistant today. And we got a really good spread as well of places where graduates were working. So unsurprisingly, kind of high numbers responding from London with 29%, but pretty much a good spread across the rest of the UK. And in terms of the numbers of roles applied, we can see that that 42% of our respondents had applied for over 50 roles since leaving university. So I know that probably if you spoke to home students, some of them would say they'd applied for that many as well. But there's definitely some sobering stats there about how many applications international students are making. Next slide, please, Gemma. What we found when we started to analyse the surveys were that those that were employed were working a lot across a really wide range of industries. So they were working in multinationals, they were working in SMEs, they were working in charities and in the public sector. So we were really happy to see that spread across lots of different types of employers. And we were also really pleased to see that of those that were employed via the graduate route, a really high proportion, 72% of them were employed at graduate level. So they were employed at kind of SOCs 1 to 3. So I know my careers colleagues in the audience will recognize what SOC codes are, but essentially the SOC code 1 is a managerial level job, SOC code 2 is a professional level job, and SOC code 3 is an associate professional role or a technical role. So really positive news. We can see there that 60% of them were employed full-time, 26% were unemployed, so not such good news there. Next slide, please, Gemma. And when we started to break down kind of what these roles were, we can see some really great examples here of the types of jobs and the types of employers. So these examples are from both the graduate route and the skilled worker visa. And we chose these amongst a large number of roles just to demonstrate the range of different things. We did notice, interestingly, that those using the skilled worker visa tended to be employed in tech, business, or engineering roles. Next slide, please, Gemma. So let's hear from some of these students. There was a lot of good news. We had so many comments, pages and pages of comments, and I'm going to pick out some of the themes. So many of them valued the flexibility of the graduate visa. They recognised it was an option to explore different career areas, to decide on what they wanted to go into, and it gave them more time than the previous system to gain employment. So I'll just give you a moment just to read those 2 comments. Okay, next slide, please, Gemma. Thank you. So another theme that we picked up was that there were employers who were recruiting international workers or international graduates that they would not have employed before. So again, I will just let you read those 2 comments. And I love the second one in the pink. It helped the employer to feel much more comfortable about hiring an international application. And that sentiment was definitely echoed across a lot of comments. Next one, please, Gemma. We also saw a theme around roles that just wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have existed. Offers that were made that would not have happened without the graduate visa. So I'll just let you read that comment. So you can see the gratitude there, I think, in that comment. Next one, please, Gemma. Another theme that came through quite strongly was that students, international graduates in the UK were feeling as if the graduate visa was almost like a try before you buy, a bit of a warm up for employers to start to consider sponsorship, even if they hadn't done before. So I'll just let you read that comment. And I really love the sort of bit about being a worthy asset, proving to themselves to the employer and building confidence that that employer might invest in them at a later date. Next slide, please, Gemma. This is a post that I spotted on LinkedIn just recently from an employer who's been really vocal about sponsorship and how he thought it would be a time-consuming, bureaucratic and expensive process, but that actually only took a few forms, a couple of £100, and 4 weeks later it was done. So I'm definitely sensing a kind of warming up of the idea of sponsorship and understanding that it might not be as hard as people at first thought. So a great comment there from Jake at Hallam. Next slide, please, Gemma. I know that you are expecting me to come with some not so good news, so here it is. And there were a lot of comments along this kind of vein. I'll just let you read them. So this feeling from international graduates that they are not always getting the opportunity to demonstrate what they could bring to an employer, and that the question around will you need a sponsor now or ever in the future, which pops up on a lot of applications, seems to be a bit of a barrier. And you can see the little graphic in the corner. We asked if their expectations of post-study work visas were being met, and 58% say yes, that's good, but a significant proportion, 24%, were saying that actually they were disappointed or disheartened by the way the visa was working out. Next slide, please, Gemma. There were a number of comments from graduates who were receiving rejections based on their visas after reaching interview. So this is quite a long comment, but powerful. I'm going to give you a moment to read it. I think you can feel what's going on for that student. Can we move on to the next one, please, Gemma? I'll let you read this one. So this international graduate, or is expressing that they had actually named the graduate schemes, but I took them out. But that just suffice to say that they were large, well-known graduate schemes where they had reached the final stage, put a lot of time and effort in. So yeah. Next slide, please, Gemma. The other theme we picked up on is that the length of the graduate visa, the fact that it's only for 2 years if you're a master's or BSc, bachelor's graduate, and 3 years as a PhD graduate. So lots of employers or lots of students telling us that they'd had feedback about the length of the visa. So I'll just let you read those two. And then one more click for me, please, Gemma. The other thing we asked about is whether the international graduates felt that employers that they were having conversations with understood the graduate visa. And you can see these two comments here. Many employers don't have policies. I've got several job offers on hold while the companies decide what to do with this visa. And the second comment, it appears that some organizations are not aware of what the visa allows and what it doesn't. So there was a very strong theme that the respondents felt that employers didn't fully understand the visas. So next slide, please, Gemma. So I want to introduce Kieran. So I saw Kieran speak a couple of weeks ago at another event. I know she's going to give us some really useful information. She's an immigration lawyer. She introduced herself a little bit at the beginning. So I'm going to pass over to Kieran to tell us a bit more about these visas.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to bring up my slides. And I'm beginning. There we go. Okay, so as I said earlier, what I'm hoping to speak to you about today is primarily the skilled worker visa. We'll have a little bit of a look at discrimination and maybe one slide on the graduate visa. So I'm not going to go into that in a huge amount of detail because it's already been done far better than what I would be able to do it anyway, with a lot of context, I think. Okay, so the main thing I think to note, just for me to add from a legal perspective in respect to the graduate visa, is that somebody has to have completed their course successfully. The university notifies UKVI of that automatically. So UKVI will then get the application, will then check, is this a student we've been notified about, that they successfully passed their course? And if they have, they will approve the application. It is a relatively straightforward application. I've had very little instruction from students needing support and help with that, because I think primarily universities are very good at supporting individuals with that. There is an application fee involved of £715 and the immigration health surcharge, but technically, you know, not very different from the student visa that most of these individuals will have been on. The only other thing that I will add is you can't have new dependents when you're on the graduate visa. So if somebody wants somebody to be a dependent on their graduate visa, they have to get them added as a dependent whilst they're on a tier 4, then they can subsequently switch as being dependents to the graduate visa, but you can't have new ones on the graduate visa. Okay, right, so moving on to the main focus of what I'll be speaking to you about today, applying for a sponsor license and sponsoring individuals. Now, it is a relatively straightforward procedure, and I know it definitely doesn't come across like that when you read about it on UKVI's website. To break it down, you complete an online application, which is submitted along with a fee. The fee depends upon whether you're a large or a small sponsor, and we will be looking at fees hopefully in the next couple of slides. Then you follow up that online application along with supporting documents, and I've listed examples of the types of supporting documents that a business would need to provide, along with a letter or information about why you as a business want to join the sponsorship management system. So it's all relatively straightforward. As you can see, the documents are documents that most businesses will be able to access pretty easily. Your latest bank statement, the employer's liability insurance certificate, your accounts, proof of business premises, your lease, HMRC registrations, evidence that you pay PAYE, and your accounts office reference number on headed paper. UKVI will also want a hierarchy chart for the business. You need to list each individual if you've got less than 50 people, but if you've got more than 50 people, a more general hierarchy chart will be acceptable. And then also why you want to join the sponsorship management system. So for most businesses, they get to the point that they want to join once they've come across an individual that they particularly want to sponsor. Hence, details of that applicant should generally be provided, the role that they'll be doing, how you located that individual. That's not the case though for all businesses. So recently, Additionally, I have a number of care homes, a number of businesses involved in digital technology and electrical engineering. They are generally shortage occupation areas, very difficult to recruit for, and businesses will often just need to join the sponsorship management system just to be able to expand the pool of individuals that they can actually look at recruiting for. So once you're on the SMS, you can recruit from both within the UK and also from abroad. You have to name key personnel as part of your application. Authorising officer is the person who will ultimately have responsibility for the SMS. Then you have a key contact, and they generally are just copied into correspondence sent by UKVI. And then it's the level 1 user who will actually do the practical day-to-day running of the SMS. One thing I will say is that I've come across a few businesses where they will say to the student, we'll sponsor you, but getting the license and maintaining the license is fully your responsibility. Unfortunately, that really isn't an option, because you have to name individuals on the SMS, and those individuals do have to take on a certain amount of responsibility, just in terms of making sure that that SMS is managed and run correctly. So it's not onerous, but what a business can't do is say, right, it's going to be the international student who will therefore manage the whole process. You do need to keep a little bit of a hand in it. Okay, so what's the cost of the sponsor license application? So if you are a large sponsor, and that's generally, quick rule of thumb, where you've got more than 50 employees, we also look at turnover as well, and other factors, but generally a quick rule of thumb is where you've got more than 50 employees, you are generally classed as a large sponsor. 1476 will be the application fee. The license is valid for a 4-year period, and then that application fee will therefore cover you for the 4-year period. If you are a small sponsor or you are a charity, so you've got charitable status officially, the fee is £536, and again, you are on the SMS for a 4-year period, at the end of which you will need to renew and pay this application fee again. To sponsor one individual, you will always have to pay the certificate of sponsorship fee. So that's the COS issuing fee, generally known as. It's £199, and it's not very high. And then in addition, quite often you will also need to pay the immigration skills charge. Now this is £1,000 per year if you are a large sponsor, or £364 per year if you are a small sponsor. There are certain circumstances where that does not need to be paid. So if you are sponsoring somebody who holds a international student visa, you do not have to pay the immigration skills charge for them. So if you are sponsoring somebody who holds an international student visa, really the only fee that you're looking at paying is the sponsor license application fee, which will allow you to be on the license for a 4-year period, and then just that £199 for that individual student. These are the employer's fees. This is what the employer is generally expected to cover. Then on the other side, we have the individual fees. So these will be the fees that will be applicable for the individual to apply for a skilled worker visa. They will always have to pay the immigration health surcharge, and that's the case for any type of limited visa now in the UK. That's to enable individuals to access the NHS. The only exceptions to that are individuals who are working in healthcare. So NHS staff and certain roles don't have to pay the immigration health surcharge. And then there's the visa application fee, which is £719, where the COS has been issued for 3 years, or 1423, where the COS will be issued for over 3 years. So that's basically, are you applying for a visa for leave for 3 years or less? If yes, it's 719. And if they're applying for more than 3 years, then the fee will be 1423. Some sponsors will help out with those fees, some won't, depending upon the business, depending upon the size of the business, what their needs are. But a business isn't under any obligation to do so. So these are the individual fees. Okay, so how do you know who you can sponsor then, when you can sponsor? In order to apply for and get a skilled worker visa approved, the individual will need to show that they have a job offer by an approved sponsor. The way that they will show that is because that sponsor will have issued them with a certificate of sponsorship. So they will get given their little certificate of sponsorship reference number, all the details on it, and they'll need to put that in their application form as well. In order to issue that certificate of sponsorship, most businesses will need to make sure that the job is skilled to an appropriate level. It's not a particularly high level anymore, and most of the jobs that I've been approached in respect of tend to meet that skills threshold. Individuals will also need to show that they meet the English language requirement. Somebody who has studied a degree level or above qualification in the UK will automatically meet the English language requirement. One, because they met it in order to come into the country to be approved onto that course. Two, that qualification that they hold will also enable them to meet it. They will have a degree level or above qualification from within the UK. So that's relatively straightforward. You've got your 20 points, your 20 points, your 10 points. We need 70 altogether. So these 50 generally are quite straightforward and are claimed quite easily. It's the next 20 which can be a little bit more complicated. Now, I don't necessarily expect you all to follow what the variations are here, but just more to be aware that there are these variations and these drops. So by way of example, note that the minimum salary for a skilled worker visa will always be 2480, and you can drop it by 70%, so that's the minimum that it is. But if someone is a new entrant, there are other minimum types of salary in place where you're scoring different points. I think the point to note is that there are options to be able to vary what salary is paid depending upon what that individual circumstances are, such as, do they hold a PhD? Is it a relevant PhD? Is it in a STEM subject? Is it a job that's classed as a shortage occupation job? Is it a health or education job? So there are variations in the salary, but generally what I'd want you to take away from this is 20,480 is the minimum that you can actually pay someone on a skilled worker visa. I'm just going to show you as well an example of an occupation code. So this is an example of an occupation code. This is code 3543. Marketing associate professionals. The actual going rate under this code is this figure, 24,400, but we can drop that by 30%, so you can be paid 70% of that figure where you are an international student who is switching to a skilled worker visa. That's considerably lower than the figure that I said here, which is 2480. So whilst 70% takes you to that, we can't actually pay anyone that low. We would have to stick with 2480, which is why I'm saying one of the things that I want you to take away is that 2480 is likely to be the minimum, and that's based upon a 39-hour working week. Okay, so two options then. You can sponsor individuals from outside of the UK or from inside of the UK. This slide will hopefully just show what the difference is at present. Primarily, it starts off with the type of certificate of sponsorship that you will allocate. A defined certificate of sponsorship for those individuals who are based outside of the UK and an undefined one for those individuals based inside of the UK. At present, priority processing has been suspended for individuals who are outside of the UK. We hope it will come back. It's been suspended since about March because of resources being diverted, but it is still available in the UK. But the process is pretty similar. They need a certificate of sponsorship. Once they've got that certificate of sponsorship, they apply for their skilled worker visa. And once that's approved, they can either then come to the UK, or if already in the UK, start working as a skilled worker. So that's just, again, a quick look at the application process for a skilled worker visa, comparing the outside of the UK to the inside of the UK. Again, very similar. You complete and submit an online application, you upload supporting documents, you no longer have to provide original documents, everything is done online. You will then give biometric information, either by way of an appointment or the new UK ID app for those individuals who are already in the UK. They will then get a decision. Once they get a decision, they can then show their employer their new visa and be able to commence working. Okay, so a quick note on discrimination. We did have a little bit of a discussion as to some of the points that international students come across when they are looking to apply for a job. I suppose what I want to make clear is it's within the current law as it is important that sponsors and employers don't fall foul of discrimination. At the moment, the way that the law is, you can't refuse to sponsor an individual simply because they require sponsorship. That doesn't mean that you have to always sponsor an individual, but the idea is that a refusal of sponsorship should be more merit-based rather than because that individual does not have the visa. So there are reasons when you may not be able to sponsor someone, and I've listed some of these on this slide here. So national security reasons, there are some jobs where you may have to be very careful as to exactly who will be able to take up that particular role, and you won't want to sponsor any individual for it. That's often to do with nationality and being permitted to access certain types of information. If you have a time critical delivery of a contract, so you've got to implement or deliver on a contract by a particular date, and you're not going to be able to get the license in place by then, you're not going to be able to sponsor by then. So again, businesses aren't expected to put themselves in a detrimental position. The skill level for the job is below that for which a skilled worker visa will be issued. So if the job isn't skilled enough, you can say, right, well, the job isn't skilled enough and that's why we can't sponsor an individual. If the salary level for the job that you're paying is below that for which a skilled worker visa can be given, again, you can say that that's a reason to not sponsor. There's not enough time to acquire a license before the migrant's leave expires. Their leave's about to expire in 2 weeks' time. You know that there's just no way you're going to be able to get onto the SMS sponsorship management system by then. So these are all valid reasons which are unrelated to merit, but generally our approach is that merit should be the reason why anybody is rejected from the recruitment process. They simply did not perform well enough as part of that recruitment process. The skills that they had to offer were not what you needed them to be, rather than a blanket refusal on sponsorship. So this is the leading case still at the moment. It's 2009 case, Osborne Clark, and this is where a student did challenge the selection process and was basically told that you can't proceed with your application because you don't have a visa and we simply do not sponsor. The reason that this case was successful is because there was no engagement by that particular employer at the time to actually look into what exactly would we have to do? What is the cost of sponsorship? How long would it take? Is it reasonable? Is it justifiable? Are there reasons? Is that the only reason why we're not sponsoring this individual? And the court's view was you can't just take a blanket approach saying, well, we just don't sponsor individuals. That's not helpful to the whole process. It's not helpful to the way that the law is looking at discrimination. So, which is why we say it's not helpful to reject the applicant at the start of the process, go through the process with them. And if you still don't feel they are appropriate for the role, as in it's merit-based, then fine, then it's fine to have a rejection upon that basis. But the actual process for joining the sponsorship management system isn't necessarily that complex. It isn't that lengthy even, so it is something that it's worth employers bearing in mind, that they don't want to trip over discrimination, and that they need to be able to justify why they wouldn't want to take someone on who was actually very qualified to do the job. What I generally advise international students to do when they approach me about the fact that they couldn't progress in the area or with the application is ask for written feedback, engage. You know, I think it's important that students aren't adversarial, because ultimately they want to form a good relationship with the organisation that they potentially want to sponsor them. But I think it's also good for the student to actually ask, you know, why am I not able to proceed, to provide an understanding as to what type of visas they can apply for, the fact that sponsorship is relatively straightforward, what the costs are, etc. So I hope that does provide a little bit of clarity, maybe a little bit of light on the situation in terms of discrimination. That's it from me for the moment. That's what I look like when I'm not sweating. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
Fantastic. Kieran, Claire, Gemma, thank you very much. We've had loads of questions coming through. I've got 30 in the Q&A, so we'll get onto those quite quickly. We probably won't get all to them, but let's see if we can get as many done as we can. Claire and Gemma, can I go to you first? Actually, one of the early questions was around numbers of students. Now, I know the UK had a target for international students actually studying at higher education, which I think was like 600,000, and that target's been hit about I think 3 years early, or many years early, I can't remember the exact number. But so one of the questions was the number of students, and I'm assuming the answer is yes, there are lots of international students looking for work, and actually the question also said about fluent English, so I only wanted to talk about sort of work readiness of those students. Who wants to go? I made the fatal mistake on Zoom, didn't I? I was like, who wants to answer this? Which is a lot harder in face-to-face. Claire, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about it from our perspective at Exeter. You know, our in the business school where I work, 85% of our PGTs, our postgraduate taught students, are international. So, you know, and I know my colleagues from other institutions are seeing rapidly rising numbers of international students in their institutions, particularly from India, big kind of growth area of students. Well, look, my dog's popping up behind me. And in terms of English, that can be a challenge for some students from some countries. Again, there is a growing kind of support across institutions for students to improve their English, and that's definitely something that we challenge students early on in their time in the UK to work on improving their English. We know that that's something that is important for the world of work and for the application process.
Great. Gemma, any perspective you'd add from the broader AGCAS membership? And also, did Northern Ireland figure in? There was a question about Northern Ireland, us having data on Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I saw that question. So I think, you know, one of the things that we want to do, and I think, you know, we plan to interrogate this data further. What we have got planned at the end of the summer is to really dig into the data that we have collected. This is just very much the first wave of analysis, and we'll be looking then at devolved nations responses. We do have some data from Northern Ireland. We don't have a great deal of data. And I have also seen that there's a question in the Q&A that looks at sample size, and I thought I could maybe just address that, Stephen. So it is a small sample size. We recognise that, you know, particularly when you're looking at the number of international students who are in the UK, but also as well when you're thinking about, you know, how many visas have been granted. I think what I would say about that is that no one else is doing this piece of work. You know, this came out of a conversation that we had as a task group, supported by ISEG, and Stephen, you'll remember those sort of early conversations. You know, how are we going to get some of this data? This is the first stage. We've got, you know, a fairly robust survey that we have designed. Yes, the sample size is small, but we could scale it up. This, for me, is very much a first step in terms of looking at how do we then, in the future, continue to gather this data and make sure that we are committed to gathering this data, because it's really important stuff. And you know, some of the quotes that Claire had shared, we've got such a rich data set. And I think it's the first step for us. As I mentioned at the beginning, the Internationalisation Task Group, this is their project. They all have day jobs. They are supported by me at the centre of AGCAS, but this is very much a very small project that we initiated that then quite quickly grew arms and legs and heads, and then had the support of all of the respective membership organisations of ISEG. So I'm really pleased that we had that first wave of responses. I acknowledge it's a small sample size, but I think we are quite ambitious in terms of what we want to try and do next and how we might gather future data. You know, thinking also about what I was talking about in terms of HESA's decision to stop collecting or to reduce the collection. I'm ambitious. Let's kind of work collaboratively across the sector to try and scale this up and maybe run future waves of this survey.
Cool, thanks. Just adding a bit of IC data, actually. So we ask employers how many of their intake, their graduate starters, actually are need a visa, and it varies a little bit from year to year, but it's pretty stable. It's around the sort of 10 to 15% mark of a typical graduate intake. So that shows the kind of numbers that employers within our pool are recruiting. So Kieran, I've got loads of questions for you, so I won't try and go through them all, but let's see where we get to. So a couple of scribbled down. You got to Osborne and Clark, actually, which I'd scribbled down beforehand, actually. One question, is that still relevant for interns? My understanding it was, if you're running an internship, it's the same, you know, rules apply in terms of discrimination.
Yeah, insofar as I'm aware, it's still relevant. I think that the Osborne Clark case is more sort of general principles. As I say, you know, I don't want to say, oh, you have to take someone on or you have to take them on so you don't fall foul of discrimination. The idea is if you there is a genuine reason as to why you don't want to take on that individual, then that's fine. But, you know, we have to look beyond that. And yes, that will also apply for interns as well.
Osborne Clark actually didn't that case centre around somebody applying for an internship?
insofar as I'm aware, and this is quite a long time ago, it was somebody applying for a job as a trainee lawyer, and it was a trainee post where they basically wanted to be able to get a training contract, as it was known.
Got it. Excellent. Cool. Okay. Another question that came through. So the license for the post-study work visa and skilled worker, you need a license for both routes, don't you?
No, you only need a license for the skilled worker visa. So anybody who applies for a post-study work visa, which is now known as the graduate visa, they will get it because they have completed a degree level qualification or above in the UK. Just by having done that, they will automatically be given 2 or 3 years. All they have to do is successfully pass that course, don't have to have a job offer, don't have to show a certain amount in funds. I've just successfully passed my course, I can pay my application fees, and they will get given a 2 to 3 year visa.
Got it. So that was the question. Yeah. So when we switched on to the fees for the employer, that's when you're actually going down the skilled worker route.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. One of the questions I can answer actually was about actually employers and the graduates, only staying for 2 years, etc. I mean, we are at the more structured end with the ISE, people running graduate programs, and the typical tenure rate is 4.5 years, which is why employers do often think about the skilled worker visa rather than the graduate route, because they want that certainty for that period of time. Great. Question here around, is there a platform where we can specifically attract or specifically target international students and in the UK? I don't know of one actually, unless I don't know anybody else does.
I mean, I'm just hesitating because I don't know that whether we're promoting kind of external things. That's why I'm hesitating. But my response to that would be that I think every university in the UK would be thrilled if an employer kind of came to us and said, we're looking for someone and we'd love an international student. I think we'd bite your hand off. That would be my answer, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and all universities have strong international cohorts, so are very keen to help them in that employability bit. So that would be one bit of advice when to go to your local university. I wonder if you could talk to this one, Kieran, because I know that it's a question that comes up in my conversation with employers. It's that although actually the process may seem relatively straightforward and actually the costs aren't as high as some people think they are, actually when you get into the time it involves to do it, and actually some of the compliance side of things that organisations do, they might contract it out, they might hire somebody who actually those costs do start to escalate a little bit. Do you think that's a fair comment, or is actually can some of those costs be mitigated and definitely don't need to be as much as some people think they are?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, if you do it in-house, if you do the application process in-house, it can, because then you're not paying external lawyers' fees in order to be able to assist you. I think it depends upon what that business particularly wants. Have they got the individuals in-house who are going to be able to do that? Because I have had a number of clients, they'll come to me, we'll have an initial meeting, I will go through what the process is, and they'll say, you know what, we think we can actually manage this ourselves. Or they may come back and say, you know what, we don't want to have to read reams of this paperwork and work out exactly what the documents should look like, and we'd rather just get somebody else in to assist us with it. So yes, it costs can mount up a little bit, but generally, and having also paid recruitment fees ourselves as an organisation, I can honestly say to you that they are still lower than what you will often pay where you are looking to fill a difficult to fill post, and what recruitment fees can often be when you're looking at a percentage of a salary. The other thing that I would add to the process, which I think is probably worth people bearing in mind, is I don't think that the process is a particularly difficult process, but UKVI are very much into dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So just because you've given them a reference number, if it's not on headed paper and in the format that they want it, they will come back and they'll reject the application. You may have given them certain documents which they say are not in the right format that they want them in. So sometimes they can be a little bit picky. So for that reason, I think sometimes employers will often feel, is this process too difficult for us? It's not that the process is so difficult. Sometimes I just think that UKVI aren't necessarily as interactive as they could be, rather than reject an application to maybe just write out and say, you're a restaurant, you're clearly going to have a food hygiene certificate in place, do you mind sending it to us, as opposed to reject because you forgot to send it to us. So I think sometimes that can also be frustrating for employers, but it is just more a matter of getting everything right rather than the process is difficult.
Got it. And a few questions came through on cost still, actually, and you did cover this, but I wonder if it's just clarifying a little bit in this round. At what point can an employer, I guess particularly a small employer, actually say no, the cost and complexity is too much of a barrier, that's just why we're not taking it, why we can't pursue a candidate? Is there a sort of a size of employer where that does become a valid excuse, or is it fundamentally it really is not good practice to ever use that as an excuse?
I don't think it's that there is no objective figure. So, if you are a small sponsor, the application fee is £536. If it's, say, an international student that you'd be potentially looking at sponsoring, that would be £199. The total cost is less than £750. So, if you as an employer are saying we simply cannot afford £750, I'm not saying that that's, I don't think it's for anyone to externally say you can or you can't, but I think that people need to look at those figures and then maybe make a decision, is this justifiable? If you are a large sponsor and you know that the individuals may be on a graduate visa and you're going to be having to pay the immigration skills charge, and that's £1,000, and then the costs amounting up to closer to 5,000-6,000, there is a marked difference in terms of what that cost is between less than 750 to looking at somebody who's on £5,000-6,000. But still, each employer, I think, will need to look at it from their own perspective and what their personal situation is. So there isn't an objective figure; it is more subjective.
And this is probably getting slightly more technical, actually, a question that expands on this a little bit around, can an employer differentiate between roles in an organisation, i.e., I've got a couple of sites, or this job that's really easy to fill, but actually this job that's really hard. So I don't want to have all my roles open to international students because that would generate too much cost, but actually that hard to fill role I will look at. That strikes me as that slightly murky territory. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's one of those things which in practice probably does happen, where you get a lot of applications through and you will possibly select an applicant who doesn't need sponsorship for those areas where you're getting a lot of applications through for, and you've got those other areas where you will then naturally possibly be looking towards the international students who may be more likely to work in those areas. So I think practically it does even itself out, but I would never go into it with the approach of this is an easy to fill area, so I just simply won't bother with an international student. It's fine because you will probably find somebody who will be able to do that job without sponsorship, but I would much rather you looked at it from that perspective rather than said at the outset, blanket, no need.
I've got a couple of questions I think that I can sort of merge into one. One is around actually, can graduates start work when they're still waiting for their visa to come through? And related to that is a question of how long do visa routes typically take, and how long does sponsorship take? How much sort of lead should an employer build into their selection process?
Yeah, I mean, I like as much time as possible. I normally ask for a minimum of 3 months to get the business on the sponsorship management system and then the individual sponsored. It just gives everybody enough time to be able to look at the documents, for me to be able to review them. So I do like 3 months. It is possible to do it a lot faster. You can also purchase priority processing. So the actual time can vary considerably, but I always think the longer we give ourselves, the less pressure we put ourselves under, and the better that it is. And as far as international students being able to work, an international student can actually work full-time from the point that their course ends. So yes, they have the right to work before then as well, but not full-time. But once their course ends, they can actually work for you on a full-time basis without the need to apply for any kind of visa, simply on their existing student visa. And they will normally have at least an additional 4 to 6 months at the end of their course to enable them to start working full-time with you.
Fantastic. I'm very conscious of running out of time, and I want to get a couple of comments into Gemma and Claire's before. Kieran, somebody popped in. Would you mind popping your email address back in the chat? Because somebody missed it, I think, on the slide. As a reminder, we will send the recording out, so we'll be able to get slides, recording, etc. But yeah, somebody asked that through. So a question for your self, Claire, around actually employers that want to engage with the university, like Exeter or other universities are available. Because actually, I mean, there's so many questions around this and so much understanding. My take is that most universities actually are they're trying to work very closely and help their international students. Any recommendations you'd give for employers in terms of how to work with yourselves as an institution?
Yeah, I mean, we're just get in touch. So every university has some kind of an employer team. They do vary in kind of size and structure, but I bet money that every institution has some kind of function for employer work, because we recognise how important that is for our students. And it looks like lots of different things. So it looks like advertising vacancies, it looks like inviting you onto campus, it looks like inviting you to come and deliver things with us in curriculum or out of curriculum. So I would really encourage any employers to reach out to local universities they want to target, courses they want to target, and actually contacting the careers team is often a more effective process than trying to reach out to academics who may be very busy kind of doing everything else. Universities are incredibly complex organizations, but the careers teams will definitely want to work with you as employers, so please get in touch.
I'd second that, definitely, Claire. Right. And the last question for you, Gemma, actually, the other bit of crystal ball gazing, so I'm ending on a toughie, I'm afraid. It struck my mind because one of the comments was around Germany and about their ease of transition to skilled worker is much easier. It's just a bit of form filling. Because yourselves, we're very heavily involved, like the UK, trying in terms of lobbying for the post-study visa, which has been successful. Ultimately, the government did listen. Do you think policy will change? Is it still a moving feast? We're not having those conversations with anybody in government, but I don't know if you are from AGCAS or universities are still lobbying, or is this, as much as it can be, pretty much a settled position now for the near future in terms of international students and rights to work?
And I'm conscious that you're asking this question when we are in political disarray, Stephen.
It's even harder.
I suppose, I mean, from the AGCAS perspective, and I guess this is where it draws on the work of ISEG, to the work that we have been doing in collaboration with yourselves and with UKISA. So for those who don't know, the UK Council for International Student Affairs, Universities UK International, there are conversations that are taking place with DFE. We are lobbying, we are pushing this agenda. We don't yet really have any news that we can report, but I suppose what I would say is that we have been successful. We are making piecemeal progress on some of these issues. And it's certainly, from an AGCAS perspective, something that we will continue to push for. And, you know, who knows what's going to happen? You know, we're in a heat wave. We have political disarray, like I said. But, you know, rest assured, it's very near the top of AGCAS's agenda in terms of the work that we do as part of our advocacy strand, and then bringing in the work of Claire in the task group, and then working with yourselves and the collective effort of ISEG. And I would just give a shout out to Anne-Marie at UKISA, who is chief exec, and the work that they do. And I think, you know, joined up all together, we're quite, you know, we've got clout, we've got, you know, sort of decent weight, and it's the expertise that I suppose underpins this as well. So I can't give a definitive answer, but what I can do is commit that AGCAS is still very much lobbying on all of these issues, because we really feel that, you know, it's absolutely crucial to the UK economy that international students and international graduates have these opportunities.
Agreed, and we join in that as well. It's fair to say, I think from the IC point of view, our role tends to be articulating the employer experience and the challenges they find in the system. That's something we've always worked quite hard on to try and get the system as user-friendly as possible for employers. So we'll keep up our side of that policy campaigning as well. Fantastic. We run slightly over time, but I'm sure people won't mind because really rich content. And sorry if we couldn't get your questions. We had 55 in the end, so I think we could have spent all afternoon going through this. Gemma, Claire, Kieran, really thank you for taking the time in this sweltering heat. Really great session. As I said at the start, the recording will be available. It takes a couple of days just to get the recording downloaded and up on websites and things, but you will be able to go back to it, and contact details are in as well, so I'm sure people will be pleased to hear from you. Thank you all very much. Hopefully the weather will break quite soon. We'll get a bit of cooler air for those where it hasn't broken already yet, Claire. And we'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having us, Stephen. Bye all.